Welcome once again to another study from the book of 2 Samuel from the pulpit of the Spring Hill Church of Christ, meeting at 405 Butler Street, Spring Hill, Louisiana. I'm Mike Hughes, your host for this study. As we look at the Old Testament, we took up with Saul the beginning of the United Kingdom. And Saul, David, and Solomon each reigned 40 years within this United Kingdom period. After this, we get into the divided kingdom between Israel, the 10 northern tribes, and Judah, the 2 southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin. This occurs at 931 BC, and in 721, the 10 tribes go into Assyrian captivity, and from there on we have Judah alone that we consider their history. Once Judah goes into Babylonian captivity in 605, beginning in 605 BC, 597, and in 586, we next come to the return from, in 605, 597, 586, Judah goes into Babylonian captivity. 70 years later, they began to return with Zerubbabel building the temple, Ezra teaching the law, and Nehemiah building the wall around Jerusalem. Here is a timeline of the 11th century BC, beginning at the birth of Samuel, 1105 BCE, before the Common Era. The birth of Saul, 1080. Saul is anointed king, 1050. David is born 1040 BC. David is anointed 1025. He rules over Judah 1010. And finally, he'll rule over Israel 1003 BCE. We are studying currently in the United Kingdom period. This study is going to compose 2 Samuel chapter 1 through chapter 4, verse 12. The book of 2 Samuel records the highlights of David's reign, is what we want to see here. First over the territory of Judah, and finally over the entire nation of Israel. It traces the ascension of David to the throne, his sins of adultery and murder, and the scattering consequences of those sins upon his family and the nation. Originally, the book of Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, were all one book, and later on, they were finally, when it came to the English translations, they divided Samuel into 2 books. The author, like 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, is anonymous, but was probably composed by an unnamed prophet who compiled written chronicles of prophets such as Nathan, Gad the seer, 1 Chronicles 29:29. In addition to these prophetic written sources, the compiler evidently used another source called the Book of Jasher. We find this referred to in 2 Samuel 1 and in verse 18. The date is probably sometime after the death of Solomon and the division of the kingdom, 931 BCE, but before the destruction of Samaria and the Assyrian captivity of the northern kingdom, 722 BCE. Likely that Samuel was composed early in the divided kingdom, perhaps around 900 BC. 2 Samuel records the major events of David's 40-year rule. His reign in Hebron begins in 1010 BC and ends in 1003 BCE. His 33-year reign is what we notice with this. His 33-year reign begins, his 40-year reign begins in 1010 BCE and ends in 1003 BCE. His 30-year reign over the United Judah and Israel. He has 33 years that he reigns over both of them, so that puts him reigning in Judah alone, just reigning Judah over Judah for 7 years. Here is a list we find in the Bible of Bible suicides. Abimelech, Judges 9, verse 54. We have Samson, Judges 16:30. Saul, of course, 1 Samuel 31:4. Saul's armor bearer, 1 Samuel 31:5. Ahithophel will be 2 Samuel 17:23. Zimri, 1 Kings 16, verse 18. Judas, Matthew 27 and verse 5. Makes for a very interesting study to study these various suicides of the Bible. We're taking up with the book of Samuel. It begins with David mourning for Saul and Jonathan, and then David's mighty men, and the failure of David will be at the end of 2 Samuel, is what we will see. We are currently studying David nears kingship. 2 Samuel 1 through 5 will be this section. David's going to be crowned king of Judah, but Saul's son still rules the rest of Israel, Ahithophel. The house of David and Saul battled for 6 or 7 years. As Saul's house will weaken, David's house will gain strength. Again, here's the layout of the book. We begin with David's political triumphs. We'll see his spiritual triumph and his military triumphs as we begin and look at the divisions of 2 Samuel. The triumphs, chapters 1 through 10. The transgressions of David, chapter 11. And the troubles of David and his family, chapters 12 through 24. The plot development of 2 Samuel. Political triumphs, spiritual triumphs, military triumphs, David's transgression, troubles in his house, troubles in the kingdom. So the ups and downs, you might say, of David's kingdom. 7 years in Hebron, 33 years in Jerusalem. Another interesting map as we begin to read here shortly, and we see the location of Hebron is what's very important between Hebron and Jerusalem, where they're located. So part 1 will begin the political triumphs of David, chapter 1 through chapter 5, verse 25. The reign of David in Hebron over Judah we'll study today, chapter 1 through chapter 4, verse 12. Saul's death and the alternative account of his death we'll see in the first chapter. We've closed out 1 Samuel. Saul is dead, and what is David doing? David is among the renegades. David is supposed to become the king of Israel. Now, do you think David will go back to Israel and say, okay, I'm king now. I have been ready to take over for some time now. What will happen if he does that? Does he have anyone who doesn't like him? People following Saul don't like David. Verse 1 starts off with where 1 Samuel leaves off. That's what we'll see in the book. As we open the book of 2 Samuel, only you and I know that Saul is dead. David doesn't know yet. In the first chapter here, David will hear that Saul is dead. After the death of Saul, when David had returned from striking down the Amalekites, David remained 2 days in Ziklag. And on the third day, behold, a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. And when he came to David, he fell to the ground and paid homage. And David said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he said to him, "I've escaped from the camp of Israel." And David said to him, "How did it go? Tell me." And he answered, "The people fled from the battle, and also many of the people have fallen and are dead. Saul and his son Jonathan are also dead." Then David said to the young man, "Who told him? How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" And the young man who told him said, "By chance I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, and there was Saul leaning on his spear, and behold, the chariots and the horsemen were close upon him. And when he looked behind him, he saw me, and he called to me, and I answered, 'Here I am.' And he said to me, 'Who are you?' And I answered him, 'I am an Amalekite.' And he said to me, 'Stand beside me and kill me, for anguish has seized me, and yet my life still lingers.' So I stood beside him and killed him, because I was sure that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown that was on his head and the armlet that was on his arm, and have brought it here." Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. And they mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and Jonathan, for his son, and for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David said to the young man, "Who told him? Where do you come from?" And he answered, "I am the son of a sojourner." And David said to him, "How is it that you're not afraid to put out your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Then David called one of the young men and said, "Go execute him." And he struck him down so that he died. And David said to him, "Your blood be on your head, for your own mouth has testified against you, saying, 'I have killed the Lord's anointed.'" Verse 17, David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and Jonathan, his son. And he said, "It should be taught to all the people of Judah. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher." And he said, "Your glory, O Israel, is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath. Publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. You mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you, nor fields of offerings. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely in life and in death, they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Your daughters of Israel wept over Saul, who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of battle. Jonathan lies slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women," he says there. And so David, we're going to find, is going to be anointed king. We're going to see this power struggle. And Ishbosheth and Joab and Abner are involved. In chapter 2, verse 1, after this, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah?" And the Lord said to him, "Go up." David said, "To which shall I go up?" And he said, "To Hebron." So David went up there, and his two wives also, Ahinoam of Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David brought up his men who were with him, every one with his household, and they lived in the towns of Hebron. And so David, in the next section, is going to be anointed king, verse 3. David brought up his men who were with him, every one with his household, and they lived in the towns of Hebron. So again, here is the location that we're looking at of Hebron, where David becomes king. And we've noticed this in our reading thus far. In verse 4, the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. When they told David, it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul. David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, may you be blessed by the Lord, because you showed this loyalty to Saul your Lord and buried him. Now, he says, may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness to you, and I will do good to you because you have done this thing. In verse 7, now therefore let your hands be strong and be valiant, for Saul your Lord is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. So now let's notice in verse 8 the right and the wrongs of loyalty. The period of David's kingship over Judah was a time of conflict with Saul's son Ishbosheth and also his general Abner. We'll see in chapters 3 and 4. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. David grew stronger and stronger while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. And so we'll look at how the transfer takes place between these two houses now. Abner's going to take over. Now there's going to be war, and Israel gets weaker and weaker, and David and Judah is going to get stronger. In verse 8, Abner, the son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim, and he made him king over Gilead and the Asherites and Jezreel and Ephraim and Benjamin and all Israel. Verse 9. Verse 10, Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Now, who's running Israel? Who's the backup? Who's loyal to David? Judah. Who's loyal to Saul? Israel. Who's going to be the leader in Israel is going to be Abner, the general of the army. Even though not loyal, we see Ishbosheth is going to be made king here in these verses. In chapter 3, verse 1, there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. David grew stronger and stronger while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. Now, we're going to get into these wives and these sons that David has while he's in Hebron, and that's what this map shows. Although Hebron's kind of off the chart, we see his first wife, Ahinoam, and he has Ammon as a son for David, and Chileab is the son of Abigail and David. And then we have Maacah, the daughter of the king of Geshur, Absalom and Tamar's only daughter. And then we have Haggith, Adonijah, and then Abital is Sephatai, and Eglah is Iteram. Those are his sons, 6 sons that were born to his wives while he was in Hebron. And here they're named. The sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn Ammon of Ahinoam of Jezreel. His second son Chileab of Abigail, the widow of Nabal. And the third Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. And the fourth Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth is Shephatiah, the son of Abital. And the sixth, Harim of Eglah, David's wife. These were born to David in Hebron, as we saw in the chart. Now, while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone in to my father's concubine?" In other words, had sex with her. And then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head of Judah? To this day, I keep showing steadfast love to the house of Saul, your father, to his brothers, and to his friends, and have not given you into the hand of David, and yet you charge me today with a fault concerning a woman? God do so to Abner, and more also, if I do not accomplish for David what the Lord has sworn to him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah from Dan to Beersheba." And Ishbosheth could not answer Abner another word because he feared him. Abner sent messengers to David on his behalf, saying, "To whom does the land belong? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring over all of Israel to you." And David said, "Good, I will make a covenant with you. You shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face." David misses her. She had been his wife that Saul had taken and given to another man. Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, "Give me my wife Michal, for whom I paid the bridal price of 100 foreskins of the Philistines." And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband Paltiel, the son of Laish. But her husband went with her, weeping after her all the way to Biram. And then Abner said to him, "Go, return." And he returned. And Abner conferred with the elders of Israel, saying, "For some time past you had been seeking David as king over you. Now then bring it about. For the Lord has promised David, saying, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Now then bring it about, for the Lord has promised David, saying, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies." Abner also spoke to Benjamin. And then Abner went to tell David at Hebron all that Israel and the whole house of Benjamin thought good to do. And so when Abner came with 20 men to David at Hebron, David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. And Abner said to David, I will arise and go, and I will gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may reign over all that your heart desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Just then the servants of David arrived with Joab from a raid, bringing much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. Then Joab and all the army that was with him came, and it was told Joab, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he has let him go, and he has gone in peace. Then Joab went to the king and said, What have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why is it that you sent him away so that he is gone? You know that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you, and to know you're going out and you're coming in, and to know all that you are doing. Now, verse 26, we're going to see Abner is going to be murdered. Let's look at chapter 3, verse 26. When Joab came out from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sirah, but David did not know about it. And when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the midst of the gate to speak with him privately, and there he struck him in the stomach, so he died for the blood of Ahithophel, his brother. After, when David heard of it, he said, I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord for the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. May it fall upon the head of Joab and upon all his father's house. And may the house of Joab never be without one who has a discharge, or who is leprous, or holds a spindle, or falls by the sword, or who lacks bread. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he had put their brother Ahithophel to death in the battle at Gibeon. And so David now is going to mourn for Abner, beginning in verse 31. David said to Joab, to all the people who were with him, tear your clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourn before Abner. And King David followed the bier. They buried Abner at Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king lamented for Abner, saying, should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen. And all the people wept again over him. Then all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was yet day. But David swore, saying, God do so to me, and more also, if I taste bread or anything else, till the sun goes down. All the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as everything the king did pleased all the people. So all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's will to put to death Abner, the son of Ner. And the king said to his servant, do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? And I was gentle today, though anointed king. These men, the sons of Zeruiah, are more severe than I. The Lord repay the evil according to their wickedness. The Lord repay the evildoers according to his wickedness. So, continuing to look at the political triumphs of David. In chapter 4, we're going to see helpful action that is of itself unjust and is not helpful at all. That's what we'll begin to see as we look at chapter 4 in verse 1. When Ahithophel, Saul's son, heard that Abner had died at Hebron, his courage failed, and all Israel was dismayed. And now Saul's son had two men who were captains of raiding bands. The name of one was Baanah, and the name of the other was Rechab, sons of Rimmon, a man of Benjamin from Beeroth, for Beeroth also is counted part of Benjamin. The Beerothites fled to Getham and have been sojourners there to this day. That is, to the day of the writing of 2 Samuel. Jonathan, the son of Saul, had a son who was crippled in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. And his nurse took him up and fled. And as she fled in her haste, he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. Say that again. Mephibosheth. That was his name. And now the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, and Rechab and Baanah set out. And about the heat of the day, they came to the house of Ishbosheth as he was taking his noonday rest. And they came into the midst of the house as if to get wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. And when they came into the house, As he lay on his bed in his bedroom, they struck him and put him to death, beheaded him. They took his head and went by the way of Arba all night and brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron. And they said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life. The Lord has avenged my lord the king this day on Saul and on his offspring." Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life. He says, "The Lord has advantaged my lord the king this day on Saul and on his offspring." But David answered Rechab and Benai, his brother, the son of Rimmon the Beerothite, "As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life out of every adversary," he says, "when one told me, 'Behold, Saul is dead,' and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and killed him at Ziklag, which is the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house, in his own bed? Shall I not now require his blood at your hand and destroy you from the earth?" And so David commanded his young men, and they killed them, cut off their hands and feet, and hanged them beside the pool at Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner at Hebron. So with that, that concludes our study today of 2 Samuel chapter 1 through 4. Chapters that are very exciting, full of action. We're going to see next week that David is going to become king of Israel, and now the whole nation will be under his kingship. He had been king of Judah alone for 7 years. Now he'll be king of both, and we'll begin to see that in 2 Samuel chapter 5 and 6 that we'll be taking up in our next study. So with that, cheerio, mate, and Bob's your uncle. If you found this video helpful and want to learn more, be sure you download the note card if available with this lesson. We also offer a free 4-lesson Bible correspondence course. For more information, scan the QR code to my left with your phone, and then go to the link that is provided for you. There you will find more video lessons that you can get and glean information from. We here at the Spring Hill Church of Christ want to help you grow in your knowledge and understanding of God's Word. Remember, we are in it for the likes and the subs, so be sure that you subscribe. With that, thanks for watching or listening. In the meantime, in between time, we will see you next time. Cheerio, mate. Bob's your uncle.